Hello, 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 and welcome to Scottish Summit 2021. My name is Andrew Butenko, and thanks for visiting my session Let's Create a PCF Control. I work as a technical architect for Hitachi Solutions America. Let's give the round of applause to our wonderful sponsors: ScriptRunner, DQ Global, Proxima 3, Redspire, Agilysys, and Hitachi Solutions. Let's walk through the agenda of today's session. Firstly, I will give you the brief introduction to what is Power Apps Component Framework. After that, I will give you the brief description of how I chose the component that will be developed today during the session. And we will start rolling I will start from initialization of the PCF project. After that, I will provide the description of components and pieces of the control that will be built. I will show you on how it is possible to troubleshoot the control using the emulator that is called testing harness. I will show how to start using React and Fluent UI in order to build wonderful and powerful controls. After that, we will deploy the control into Dataverse instance. And lastly, I will provide instructions using which it will be possible to speed up the development process using the Fiddler application. So what is Power Apps Component Framework? Power Apps Component Framework is the UI framework using which it is possible to develop components. What types of components can I build? At the moment, it is possible to build two types of components, of field type and dataset type. Okay, where can those developed controls can be used? At the moment, it is possible to use those controls in two types of Power Apps, and it is model-driven apps and canvas apps. What tools do I need to build those wonderful controls? There are three things that you will need: Power Apps CLI, Visual Studio or VS Code, it depends on you what you would prefer, and Node.js. Let's talk a bit about the control that I will develop today. Because Scottish Summit in 2021 is the virtual event, I can't get any ideas from you during the session, so I decided to do that in advance, and I tweeted about it. So here are results. I got 35 responses, and that is awesome. And the winner is email control that allows to send email either out of box Dataverse email form or using the standard client that is used. So now I'm almost done with with my slides, and this is almost the very last slide that you will see during this presentation. And after that, I will switch to Visual Studio and I start building the control itself. Let's start the development of the control. And development starts from the initialization of the PCF project. This can be done using following command: pack PCF init. After that, I provide the name for the control, and it will be email control. I provide namespace, and let's say it will be Scottish Summit, and the very last required parameter is the type of the control, and in our case it will be the field. Let's hit enter. Once it is completed, it is required to run npm install command to install all the required dependencies for this particular control. It will take a while, so I will speed up the process here. Awesome. Finally, when the installation is completed, it is possible to open the project. In order to do that, I'm choosing File, Open Folder. I provide the path to the folder where the control is located. Hit Enter and click Select Folder. The very first file you would love to take a look at is the control manifest.input.xml file. And generally speaking, this file describes the metadata of the control. The first part of configuration is not relevant for our control, so I just delete it. By default, the sample property is generated and it is of type text. So let's do few changes over here. So first one, let's change the name of the field. Let's change it just to email. And display name, email field. Description key, it is possible to provide any kind of description if you want to provide some additional information for the user that will configure the control. So in our case, it's not required, but let's change it to email field used here. And for the type, let's change text to email. Usage bound required true. I don't plan to use any other properties, so let me just drop this. I don't plan to introduce any CSS or resource files, so I don't need it, so I'm just dropping this. And I plan to use one of features that is available at the moment for the PCF controller. This is the utility thing, because I plan to open forms and XRAM, and this utility thing gives the access to opening of forms and navigating to other records. So I will need this part. So in order to use it, I will uncomment this part and save the manifest file. So the next part to take a look at is generated and manifest types d.ts. This file is generated from this control manifest input XML. By default, it contains sample property, and because we changed the name of the property, let's rebuild and let's allow framework to regenerate the name and use the proper naming. In order to do that, I'm opening the terminal and I'm running command npm run build. That should be faster than npm install command. And it is done. And as you can see, the name was changed to email. The next part and next major part of the control is index.ts. So this is the starting point of the whole control, and by default it contains just the stop that can be built, but that will produce nothing as the output. So let's start modifying the code and let's go through part to part, and I will give the brief introduction on what is what here. So constructor, it's just the constructor for your component, and if you want to initialize some variables before the initialization of component or something like that, you can use constructor for that. This command, this part is init, and this is the method that is called during the first initialization of the control. So when the control is initialized, this method is called, and it is called with multiple parameters. So let's go one by one through the whole list. So context. Context is really complex and huge object that contains information about the metadata of the control, about the bound properties, about the values of those properties, and it also contains information about the whole environment of the control that surrounds the control. Like if we are talking about model-driven apps in which I will use the control, it is possible to get something like user settings, or even global environment settings. For example, as an example of user settings, in one of my controls, I used number of records per page for grids that is shown by default. And if we're talking about the global settings, in one of my controls, I utilize the Bing Map API key that is exposed through the context, and it is available there. Let's go further. So notify output changed. Notify output change is the method that is passed as parameter into init module, into init function that has to be called when the value of your field was changed. And in this order, using this method, in this way, your code can notify everything that surrounds the control, like the whole environment form, that the value was changed, and the environment should react on that thing. State is not used in my code, so let's leave it. And container. Container is, generally speaking, the HTML div that is given to us to render the whole content of the control inside of it. And it is passed only into init method, and it's not passed anywhere else. So I don't need this part, so let me drop it. And I will need two pieces because it is available only init method. I have to store it somewhere. So let me declare two class level private variables in which I will store the notify output changed method and container. So private container of type HTML div element and private notify output changed of type function, and that returns void. And now in init method, let's assign it. So this dot container equals container. This notify output change equals notify output changed. So let's leave it, and let's go further and go through other methods that are available by default. So the next one is update view. Update view is the method that is called when the platform tries to work with the control and notifies that something is changed. Let's say the value of the control of the attribute to which control is bound was changed, or let's say the disable property for the control was flipped from disabled to enabled, or vice versa, or let's say the form was saved and control has to handle this situation in some way. I will use this update view method in my code further. So let's just drop the comments and let's go further. And the very last part, get outputs. Get outputs is the method that is called by the platform immediately after your control calls the notify output changed, and it is used to return the value of the field, updated value of the field, and return it to environment to process it in some way. I will use it afterwards, so let's leave it at the moment. And the very last part that is available by default is just the destructor. If you want to avoid memory leaks, if you want to clean up something before the control is unloaded, put that logic into destructor, sorry. And at the moment I don't need it, so I will just clean it up. So this is the whole code that we will use, and let me reformat it. Let me save it. Now let's build something that works. In order to get the value of the email field in init method, I use following code. Let email value equals context dot parameters dot email dot raw, and this will bring the value of email here in order to show that I was able to get the value of it, let's assign the value of the current value of email just as inner HTML of the container that we have. In order to do that, I'm using this following code. This container.inner HTML equals email value. Barks because it waits for string. So let's do this trick. And let's do the very first run. In order to run and test this control in harness, I'm running following command: npm start. As you can see, the value that was initialized and well is the default value for string fields is passed inside the container. But if I will start typing something here, the changes that I did are not reflected over here. Let's change it. Let me close this and let me jump back to the file. Let's stop the emulation by hitting Control C, and yes, terminating the job. And let's handle the update. Let's handle this change in update view. What I will do, I will just copy exactly the same code here. I'm saving it, and let's do it again. npm start. Value is passed inside if I will start changing it, changes that I'm doing with the control are reflected. Now let me close this and let me open this and let me stop the execution again. So as you can see, this control is alive already. It works, but it is really far from the control that I plan to build. So let me start building the UI pieces. And in order to do that, I will use React and Fluent UI. You can ask me why do you use it? And I will answer because React and Fluent UI are awesome, and almost all the applications in the Microsoft infrastructure that have the web interface are either built or will be migrated to the application that use React and Fluent UI. Our Dataverse is built of it. SharePoint is built of it. Exchange is built of it. And that's where evolution goes. So in order to make life easier, I highly recommend, if you haven't done that yet, you should start learning React and Fluent UI. And in order to start using it in my project, I have to install few additional modules. I will speed up the video over here because it will take a while and I don't want to take your time. Once all the required pieces are installed, let's start building the component that will display the text box and possibility to choose on how to send the email to a receiver. Let me go here, let me minimize this, and let me add new file, and I will call it email control component.tsx. In order to use React, I have to import it into this tsx component to be used inside. So in order to do that, I am typing following: import all as React from React. In my control, I will use text field from the Fluent UI. So in order to use it, I will import it as well. So import text field from Fluent UI React lib text field. The next part I will write will be the interface that will describe the property for the control. Let's call it email control component props, and it will have two properties. The first one will be value. That will basically define the string value that will be passed inside the control initially. And the second one will be the handler that has to be called when the change of the text value inside the control was changed. So on value changed, it will be the handler that will contain the parameter value passed, string, and that will return nothing. The next part is the control itself, and in this video I will use the function component instead of the class component that I used to use before. Export constant email control component React function component with properties. So this, and it is equal props and properties interface and feather and return, and let's do just blank element. Done. Let's start to bring some content inside. So this will be generally just the text field that was defined already. And let's start assigning properties to it. So value will be just props dot value. And when on change event is triggered, I will call this callback. This is the event that is not used in any way in the code, but I'm interested in this new value parameter that is passed inside of type string feather, and I'm calling props on value changed and passing the new value inside. The next part to be implemented is usage of this email control component inside the index.ts file. And to do that, I'm going back to index.ts and I'm adding few references that I will need. The first one, import all as React from React. The next one is import all as React DOM from React DOM. And the very last reference that I will need is the control itself. Import email control component from email control component. Done. So one thing that I forgot to mention is this get outputs. In order to return any value, it has to know the current value of the field, and we don't have it anywhere defined. So let me define it just under the container and notify output changed. So private current value, it could be new, it could be undefined, and it will be string. And during the initialization, I will set it. This current value equals, let me copy this part, and because current value can accept either string or undefined, and raw is string or null. I'm just using this and assigning undefined to it. The next part. Let me drop this code because it will not be used anymore. This and this. And for get outputs, when it is called for into email, I will return this dot current value. Done. The next part. Generally speaking, the init and update view will call pretty the same thing that works with the component and refresh the value of it. So I will create the separated method, private render control, and I will pass the context inside of it. And I will call it here inside init, just render control, context, and in the update view, I will just call again this render control and context. Done. Okay. Done. And now I will have to build the code that will use this email control component and render it inside the container that we are passed. In order to render the control, I'm using following code: react DOM.render. And as a parameters, I have the DOM element and container. So let's do step by step. The very first is react.createElement, and I'm passing the email control component, and as properties for it, I'm passing value, and value I'm getting from the context. Context dot parameters dot email dot raw, and if it is null, but it should be, when it is null, it should be undefined, I'm passing undefined, and on value changed handler is value string. So when this happens, I have to assign this current value to value, and I have to call this on notify output changed. And as a second parameter, I have to pass the container, and in our case it's this dot container. Done. Let's test it. In order to test it, I'm just running old good npm start command from the terminal. As you can see, now we have the control that can be edited. Let's start to change value here. As you can see, the value is reflected over here. If I'm trying to change value here, it accepts the right value. Wonderful. So we have control that already works. This control works, but it doesn't do what it is expected to do. So in order to implement my idea, I have to add the additional functionality that will allow emailing directly from this control. And as my idea, I decided to utilize the suffix of this text field that is there, but it's not shown when there is no value. And in order to utilize it, I will create a custom renderer. And in order to use cool-looking buttons and drop-downs and contextual menus, I have to add few additional items. So this is icon button that will basically used as a button that will display email icon. Icon props to, generally speaking, describe the icon that I will use. Initialize icon function, it will be utilized to call and initialize icon, because by default for some reason they are not loaded, and in order to load it, it is required to call initialize icons in PCF control specifically. And contextual menu props. When the button will be clicked, it will contain the drop-down of two items, and in order to describe it properly, I will need the declaration of that contextual menu props. Using the following code, I will describe the icon and menus that I will use inside this custom renderer. So let me type it: const email button props of type icon props equals, and now I can use IntelliSense icon name that will be mail. I describe the icon that will be used inside the button. Okay, and the next part is constant menu props of type contextual menu props. This is the object, and items is an array of two objects that will be to our icons. The very first one will be key, is just email message, and next one, text, will be send standard email message, and I will use exactly the same icon. So icon props for it will be just mail button props, and for the second one, key will be CD Dataverse message, and text will be send email using Dataverse, and icon will be other one, and I will use icon name database just to differentiate two of those. The next part will be to add the custom renderer, and in my case it will be on render suffix equals, it will be the function that arrow, and I will have to return, and in my case it will be just the icon button. Close the tag, and I have to set the icon props equals, and in my case it will be email button props. Save, and in order everything to work properly, I have to initialize icon. Let's call it just right here. Let's save it, and let's start. Now, as you can see, it is the button with email icon, but without any drop-down options. Let's add it. Let's stop this, and let's add it here. So it's menu props equals menu props, and let's restart it. Now we got the drop down and we got two options, but on click on it, nothing happens. So the next step is to add handlers to it. Let me jump back to Studio. Let me stop running, and let's add handler to the standard one. So the handler will be on click. What I will do, is, it will be just the handler, and by click on it, it will try to navigate to following URL window, location, ref, set to formatted value, and it's possible to call the default browser using the following abbreviation, and inside of it I will pass just props value. Let's restart and check if it works. Run, send. As you can see, this email was passed here, even it's not really an email. In order to implement the second handler for send email using Dataverse, I will have to communicate with the context. So I don't have it inside here. So I will have to either bring it here or use additional callback. I will do the second. I will introduce additional callback. So on send email, and it will have no parameters. I don't need it, and it will return nothing, and it will be called on this. So on click, I will just call. It will be just, general speaking, props dot on send email, and done. Now we have problem over here because I introduced another one callback and it knows nothing about it. So let's implement it on send email. So this is handler and fat arrow. What to do here? In order to get the information about the current record from which I plan to send an email, I'm using the information that is available in the context. So I'm declaring the current record reference, and it will look like this: constant current record equals object, and I'm starting to generally speaking, it's the lookup that points to the current record ID, and the information is available inside the context. So it's any context mode dot context info dot entity ID. I will need entity type as well. Context info. Yes, that's correct. Let me copy that part, and entity type will be under the property entity type name, and I will need the name of the record as well, and it will be available under the property entity record name. Let's say first part is completed. The next part is opening of the email record. And in order to do that, I'm using the context.navigation.open form, and as a parameter I have to pass the object. Entity name is just email, and I'm passing create from entity, and in this particular case it will be current record, and I want this record to be opened in new window. That is true, but also I want to pre-fill the receiver of the email, so set populate 2 with it, and in order to do that I'm passing the second object, and I'm doing following trick because it accepts only strings, and this should be collection of strings. I have to pass this current record inside somehow, and the trick that I discovered, what is required is just to stringify it, and because 2 can be multiple or single or none, I have to pass an array, so it will look like that. So now let's test. Let's try it and send the mail using Dataverse. And it's not doable because Harness is cool and awesome, but it knows nothing about the infrastructure. So the next step is importing all the control into Dataverse and testing it over there. The easiest and the fastest way to import the control into CDS is to use PCF push command, but that requires to create the authentication profile within PowerUp CLI. So let's do it. So in order to create the new profile, run following command: pack auth create -u, that stands for URL, and provide the URL of your CDS instance. In my case, it will be https ssdemo crm dynamics.com. Hit enter. You will get the authentication window where you can provide your credentials. I will use my credentials here. I will provide my password and I will hit sign in. Because this is trial, it suggests me this. I will click skip for now and click next. After that, the profile is created and set as default. In order to push the control, the latest version of control, into Dataverse, I use the command PCF push, and I have to provide the publisher prefix. And in this case, I will use SS, that stands for Scottish Summit. And done. And the next step is configuration and testing of the PCF control inside Dataverse. In order to configure, I'm opening my Dataverse instance. I have SSDemo solution that contains required entity that I will use for testing. In this case, this is contact. I'm opening contact, going to forms, opening the form. Once it is opened, I'm checking the properties of the email field. Once it's loaded, I'm navigating to controls, clicking add control, and choosing the email control component that I developed. I hit add. I'm choosing types of the client to display the control on, hitting OK, saving, and publishing the control. Once changes are published, I'm going to contacts and opening the contact. As you can see, the control is displayed over here. And if I will use the standard email message button, I will get the standard message using the standard email client. In my case, this is Outlook. And if I will use the second option, send email using Dataverse, I will get the email form populated and created for me. That contains the receiver, and that is created regarding this contact I was opening email form from. Let me close the new email form and get back to contact. So as you can see, control looks almost how the native control, but it doesn't look exactly the same. So let me add few things into the control and show how it is possible using the Fiddler application, how to limit the need to repush changes of the control every single time I'm performing some kind of change in the code of it. So the step one. First step is defining of the URL by which the bundle.js file that basically contains all of controls content, including JavaScript, styling, and so on, is located. In order to do that, first thing, run the fiddler. Once it is started, minimize it, hit F12 in your browser to cause the browser developer tools, click with the right of the mouse on the refresh button, and click empty cache and hard reload, and wait until the page is reloaded. Once it is completed and the page is loaded, go back to Fiddler and try to compose your best guess on the URL of your controls bundle.js. You can just hit Ctrl F and type something that based on which you can find your bundle.js of your PCF control. In my case, I know that it has to contain the Scottish because I use the Scottish Summit name, and I have few matchings. Let's check it out. Let's check this one. So just copy this part, starting from web resources and ending with bundle.js, and go to autoresponder. Hit add rule, and it will immediately provide you with the URL of the web resource that you already use, and point to the proper place where your bundle.js of the control that is get built is located. In my case, it is the projects Scottish Summit 2021 email control, under email control, under under out, controls, email control, and bundle.js. Save it, and from one of previous controls you can copy this part of regular expression. So just copy and paste everything that is before the web resources and save it. If you want, you can also test it. So, and as you can see, it matched the pattern. Once this configuration is completed, you can just minimize Fiddler, return to your browser. Now you can go back to your Visual Studio and you can apply changes that you want to apply. In my case, it will be adding of the styling for the field to have more native look and feel. So I'm going back to my email control component TS6, and I'm adding the really long and complicated styling over here. I want to add some missing interfaces that are referenced here, and to the text field I want to add styling. Styles equal, and this will be text field style. Once it is completed, here is the trick. I'm running npm run build command. After it was built, I'm going back to browser, opening my contact, hit with the right mouse on the refresh button and clicking empty cache and hard reload. That will request the new version of bundle.js from the server that will be intercepted with the Fiddler, and it will provide the updated version that contains the styling that makes this control look more native comparing how it looked before. Thank you for your interest to my session. Here is few my social channels you can use to get in touch with me: my Twitter, my blog, my LinkedIn, and my GitHub. Thank you, and the recording of this session will be uploaded to the YouTube during 2 weeks after the event. Thanks.